What's the worst thing you've falsely been accused of? The email arrived on a Thursday evening in October, marked urgent, confidential, with a subject line that made my stomach drop. Disciplinary investigation. Report to HR immediately. I was grading papers at my kitchen table when it popped up on my phone, sent from the district's legal department at 6:47 p.m. The message was brief and sterile. Miss Rodriguez, you are required to attend a meeting tomorrow at 8:00 a.m. regarding allegations that have been brought to the administration's attention. Do not discuss this matter with colleagues or students. I'd been teaching 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary for 8 years, with nothing more serious than the occasional parent complaint about homework policies. The idea that I was facing some kind of disciplinary action felt surreal, like getting a cancer diagnosis when you'd only gone in for a routine checkup. I called the number listed in the email, but it went straight to voicemail. The automated message informed me that the district offices were closed and to call back during business hours. That night, I barely slept. I ran through every interaction I'd had with students, parents, and colleagues over the past few weeks, trying to identify what could have triggered an investigation. Had I said something inappropriate, violated some policy I wasn't aware of? The uncertainty was agonizing, made worse by the email's instruction not to discuss it with anyone. Friday morning, I arrived at the district office 20 minutes early, my hands shaking as I signed in at the reception desk. The building smelled like industrial carpet and burnt coffee, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. I was directed to a conference room on the 3rd floor, where 3 people were waiting with manila folders and legal pads. Miss Rodriguez, thank you for coming, said Janet Morrison, the district's HR director, gesturing to a chair across from their table. This is Detective Sarah Chen from the County Sheriff's Office, and Robert Walsh from our legal department. The presence of a detective made my chest tighten. Whatever this was about, it was serious enough to involve law enforcement. I sat down carefully, trying to project calm while my heart hammered against my ribs. We've received some concerning allegations about your conduct with students, Morrison continued, opening her folder. Specifically, allegations of inappropriate physical contact and potentially criminal behavior. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'm sorry, what? Inappropriate contact with my students? Detective Chen leaned forward. Miss Rodriguez, we need to ask you some questions about your relationship with several students in your current class. You have the right to have a union representative present, and you have the right to remain silent. I don't understand, I said, my voice coming out higher than intended. What exactly am I being accused of? Walsh consulted his notes. Multiple parents have come forward with concerns about your behavior during after-school tutoring sessions. They allege that you've been engaging in inappropriate touching and making students uncomfortable. I felt the room spinning slightly. That's absolutely not true. I would never touch a student inappropriately. What are you talking about specifically? Morrison pulled out a piece of paper. On October 3rd, did you require Tommy Martinez to stay after school for additional help with math? Yes, Tommy was struggling with multiplication tables. His mother requested extra tutoring. And during the session, did you place your hands on Tommy's shoulders and massage them? I stared at her, trying to process the question. I put my hands on his shoulders for maybe 2 seconds when he was getting frustrated. He was crying because he couldn't understand the problems, and I was trying to calm him down. It was completely innocent. Detective Chen made a note. What about October 10th with Emma Sullivan? What about it? Did you help her stretch during the after-school session? She said her back hurt from sitting at her desk all day. I showed her some simple stretches that my own physical therapist had taught me. Her mother was there for pickup and saw the whole thing. But even as I said it, I could see how these innocent interactions might be twisted into something sinister by someone looking for wrongdoing. My standard practice of staying late to help struggling students, something I'd done for years without incident, was suddenly being reframed as predatory behavior. The questioning continued for 2 hours. Every casual touch, every moment of comfort I'd provided to upset children, every private conversation about academic struggles was dissected and recorded. By the end, they'd compiled a list of 11 separate incidents spanning the first month of the school year. Miss Rodriguez, effective immediately. You're being placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of this investigation, Morrison announced. You're not to set foot on school property or contact any students or their families. This is insane, I said, finally finding my voice. I've dedicated my career to helping children. I would never hurt a student. The investigation will determine that, Detective Chen said. We'll need you to come to the station next week for a formal interview. I left the district office in a daze, my teaching career suddenly in ruins over what amounted to normal, pairing interactions with my students. The parking lot felt too bright, the October air too cold against my flushed face. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I trusted myself to drive home. The first person I called was my union representative, Maria Santos, who'd been fighting for teachers' rights in the district for over 15 years. Her reaction to my story was immediate and fierce. This is a goddamn witch hunt, she said after I'd explained everything. I've seen this pattern before. One parent makes a complaint, others pile on, and suddenly a good teacher's life is destroyed. But why would parents make false accusations? Could be anything. A kid mentions they don't like staying after school. A parent misinterprets something innocent. Social media paranoia about predators in schools. Once the rumor mill starts, it takes on a life of its own. Maria recommended a criminal defense attorney named David Kim, who specialized in cases involving educators. His fees were astronomical, $5,000 just for the retainer, but Maria insisted I couldn't navigate this alone. Kim's office was in a glass tower downtown, all modern furniture and abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too many cases like mine. The good news is that these allegations are very general and non-specific, he said after reviewing the complaint documents. No claims of sexual assault, no descriptions of overtly inappropriate behavior. The bad news is that in the current climate, even innocent contact can be criminalized if the prosecution wants to make an example. An example of what? The district is probably under pressure to show they take child safety seriously. Maybe there's been media coverage about abuse in schools. Maybe parents are demanding action. You could be collateral damage in someone else's political agenda. Kim explained that criminal charges hadn't been filed yet, but the police investigation could lead to misdemeanor charges for inappropriate contact with minors. Even if I was ultimately cleared, the allegations alone could end my teaching career permanently. We need to be proactive, he said. I want you to compile a list of every parent, colleague, and administrator who can speak to your character. We'll also need documentation of your teaching methods, training records, anything that shows your interactions with students were professional and appropriate. I spent the weekend creating a timeline of every after-school tutoring session I'd conducted since the beginning of the year. I had sign-in sheets, parent permission forms, and email communications that documented documented everything. Most sessions had multiple students present, making the idea of inappropriate behavior logistically impossible. Monday morning, I called several parents whose children I'd helped over the years. The conversations were awkward and painful, explaining that I was under investigation without being able to discuss specifics, asking if they'd be willing to provide character references. Most were supportive, expressing shock and disbelief at the allegations, but I could hear the uncertainty in their voices, the questions they were too polite to ask directly. Once doubt is planted about a teacher's conduct with children, it spreads like a virus, infecting even the strongest relationships. The hardest call was to my principal, Margaret Foster, who'd hired me fresh out of college and mentored me through my early years of teaching. She'd always been supportive, writing glowing evaluations and recommending me for leadership roles within the school. "Emily, I'm so sorry this is happening," she said, but her voice had a careful, distant quality I'd never heard before. "I have to follow district protocol during the investigation, but I want you to know that I've never seen anything inappropriate in your teaching. Margaret, you know me. You know I would never hurt a child. I do know you, Emily, but I also have to protect the other students and staff. I'm sure this will all get sorted out." The conversation left me feeling more isolated than before. Even people who knew me well were hedging their bets, protecting themselves from association with someone under investigation for child abuse. Tuesday brought the first local media coverage. The story appeared on page 3 of the county newspaper. "Elementary teacher under investigation for inappropriate contact." My name wasn't used, but Riverside Elementary was identified, making it easy for anyone in the community to figure out who was involved. The article was brief and factual, but it might as well have been a scarlet letter branded on my forehead. Within hours, the school district's Facebook page was flooded with comments from outraged parents demanding answers and calling for stronger background checks for teachers. My own social media accounts, which I'd kept private and professional, suddenly had dozens of friend requests from strangers and reporters. I deactivated everything immediately, but screenshots of my profile picture were already circulating online with speculation about my guilt or innocence. Wednesday morning, Detective Chen called to schedule my formal interview for the following Monday. She was polite but businesslike, explaining that I could bring my attorney and that the session would be recorded. "Detective, can you tell me who made the initial complaint?" I asked. "I can't discuss the specifics of our investigation, Miss Rodriguez, but I will say that multiple parents have come forward independently with similar concerns." "Similar concerns about what, exactly?" "I've never done anything inappropriate with any student. That's what we're trying to determine." The weekend before my police interview, him and I met for 3 hours to prepare. He had me walk through every interaction I could remember with each of the students mentioned in the complaint, paying particular attention to any physical contact. "The key is to be completely honest about everything," he said. "Don't minimize or justify your actions, but also don't accept characterizations that make innocent behavior sound inappropriate. What if they ask me directly if I've ever touched a student? You tell the truth. You've provided comfort to upset children. You've helped them with stretches when they complained of discomfort. You've guided their hands while teaching them to write. These are normal parts of elementary education, and any reasonable person understands that." But as Kim spoke, I realized how naive I'd been about the current climate around teachers and students. Behaviors that had been considered caring and nurturing just a few years ago were now viewed with suspicion. The pendulum had swung so far toward protecting children that it was destroying the adults who dedicated their lives to helping them. Monday's interview took place at the sheriff's station in a small, windowless room with a metal table and plastic chairs. Detective Chen was joined by her partner, Detective Michael Torres, and a child services investigator named Linda Park. They started with background questions, my education, teaching experience, training in child development. Then they moved to the specific allegations, asking me to describe each incident in detail. "On October 3rd, you were alone with Tommy Martinez after school," Detective Chen said, consulting her notes. "Tell us what happened during that session." "Tommy was struggling with multiplication tables. His mother, Rosa Martinez, had requested additional tutoring. The session lasted about 45 minutes, and Tommy became frustrated when he couldn't understand the concept." "And did you touch Tommy during this session?" "When he started crying, I briefly placed my hands on his shoulders to comfort him. It lasted maybe 2 or 3 seconds." "Did you massage his shoulders?" "No, I didn't massage anything. I just put my hands on his shoulders the way you might comfort any upset child." Detective Torres leaned forward. "Miss Rodriguez, several parents have described your touching as inappropriate and excessive. How do you respond to that?" "I respond by saying it's not true. Every physical contact I've had with students has been brief, appropriate, and in full view of others. I've never done anything that could reasonably be considered inappropriate." The interview continued for 90 minutes, covering each alleged incident in exhaustive detail. By the end, I felt like I'd been put through a psychological meat grinder, forced to defend normal human compassion as if it were criminal behavior. "We'll be in touch about next steps," Detective Chen said as the session concluded. "In the meantime, continue to avoid contact with students and their families." 2 weeks later, Kim called with an update. The district attorney's office had decided not to file criminal charges, citing insufficient evidence and the minor nature of the alleged contact. It should have been good news, but Kim's tone suggested otherwise. "The problem is that avoiding criminal charges doesn't clear you professionally," he explained. "The district can still terminate your employment based on the allegations alone. Even if I didn't do anything wrong, school districts have broad authority to fire teachers for conduct they deem inappropriate, even without criminal convictions. Your union can fight it, but the process could take years." Meanwhile, the investigation had taken on a life of its own at Riverside Elementary. Parents were demanding answers. The PTA had called emergency meetings, and several families were threatening to transfer their children to other schools. Principal Foster called me at home on a Thursday evening, her voice strained and exhausted. "Emily, I need you to know that I still believe in your innocence, but the pressure from parents and the district office is enormous. They're talking about making personnel changes to restore confidence in the school." "Personnel changes meaning firing me. I'm trying to fight for you, but my hands are tied. The district is more concerned about liability and public perception than about due process or teacher rights." The next blow came from an unexpected source. Channel 7 News ran a segment about inappropriate conduct in local schools, featuring interviews with concerned parents and shots of Riverside Elementary's exterior. While they didn't use my name, the story included enough details to make my identity obvious to anyone following the case. The reporter, Amanda Walsh, concluded the segment by saying, "While no criminal charges have been filed, questions remain about district policies regarding physical contact between teachers and students. Parents are demanding transparency and accountability to ensure their children's safety." Within hours of the broadcast, my home address was posted posted on several social media platforms, along with photos of my car and license plate number. Strangers began driving slowly past my house, some stopping to take pictures. I had to stay with my sister across town because I no longer felt safe in my own home. The psychological toll was devastating. I'd gone from being a respected educator to a pariah in my own community, all based on allegations that had been investigated and found insufficient for criminal charges. But in the court of public opinion, insufficient evidence wasn't the same as innocence. 3 months after the initial email, the district's investigation concluded with a finding of conduct inconsistent with professional standards. While they stopped short of calling my behavior criminal, they determined that my excessive physical contact with students created an inappropriate environment. The recommended punishment was termination of my employment and permanent barring from working in any capacity with the school district. My union appealed the decision, but the process would take at least a year, during which I remained suspended without pay. Maria Santos was furious with the outcome. "They've essentially destroyed your career based on hearsay and paranoia," she said during a meeting in her cluttered office. "This sets a terrible precedent for every teacher in the district. What are my options? We fight the termination through the grievance process, which could take 18 months. We can also file a lawsuit against the district for wrongful termination and defamation, but that's expensive and uncertain." I chose to fight, partly out of principle and partly because I had nothing left to lose. My savings were depleted from legal fees, my reputation was destroyed, and my career was over regardless of the outcome. The grievance hearing took place 6 months later in a sterile conference room at the district office. I testified for 3 hours about my teaching methods, my interactions with students, and my commitment to child safety. Character witnesses included former colleagues, parents of students I'd taught, and education experts who explained the importance of appropriate physical comfort in elementary education. The district's case relied heavily on the testimony of the parents who'd made the initial complaints. Rosa Martinez, Tommy's mother, described her son coming home confused and upset after tutoring sessions. She said Tommy had mentioned that I'd touched his shoulders and made him uncomfortable. When cross-examined by my union representative, Martinez admitted that Tommy had never used words like inappropriate or uncomfortable. Those were her interpretations of his general reluctance to attend tutoring sessions. Emma Sullivan's mother testified that her daughter had seemed different after I'd helped her with stretches, but couldn't provide specific examples of changed behavior. Under questioning, she acknowledged that Emma had continued to speak positively about me and had been upset when told I wouldn't be returning to school. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Patricia Vance, a child psychologist hired by the district to review the case. She argued that physical contact between teachers and students, even innocent contact, created inappropriate boundaries and could be grooming behavior for more serious abuse. While Ms. Rodriguez may not have intended harm, Dr. Vance testified, her pattern of physical contact with vulnerable children represents a serious breach of professional conduct. My attorney challenged Dr. Vance's credentials and pointed out that she'd never interviewed any of the students involved or observed my teaching methods firsthand, but her testimony carried weight with the hearing panel. 3 district administrators who seemed more concerned with liability than justice. The decision came down 8 weeks later, termination upheld. The panel found that while my conduct may not have been criminal, it violated district policies regarding appropriate teacher-student boundaries. They recommended that I seek counseling and retraining before attempting to work with children in any capacity. Reading that decision felt like a death sentence for my professional life. 24 years old, 8 years of teaching experience, and I was essentially blacklisted from education based on providing comfort to upset children. The civil lawsuit that followed was a different kind of nightmare. Discovery revealed that the initial complaint had come from a single parent who'd been upset about her daughter's grades and had been looking for reasons to criticize my teaching. Other parents had joined in after being contacted by school administrators who'd asked leading questions about their children's experiences in my classroom. Depositions revealed that several of the concerned parents had never actually witnessed inappropriate behavior. They'd simply been told by district officials that other parents had complaints and were asked if they'd noticed anything unusual about their own children. The lawsuit dragged on for 2 years, consuming what remained of my savings and destroying any hope I had of returning to teaching. The district eventually settled for $50,000, enough to cover my legal fees but nowhere near compensation for my lost career and destroyed reputation. By then, I'd moved to another state and was working as a freelance tutor, helping students online where physical contact wasn't an issue. I'd also started seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma of being falsely accused and the loss of my professional identity. Dr. Jennifer Martinez specialized in helping professionals who'd been wrongfully accused of misconduct. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced was increasingly common, dedicated teachers destroyed by a system so focused on preventing abuse that it couldn't distinguish between predatory behavior and normal, caring interactions with children. The tragedy is that this climate of suspicion ultimately harms the children it's meant to protect, she explained during one of our sessions. When teachers are afraid to comfort an upset child or provide appropriate physical guidance, the educational environment becomes cold and sterile. 3 years after the initial email, I received an unexpected phone call from Rosa Martinez, Tommy's mother. She was crying as she explained that Tommy, now in 6th grade, had been struggling academically and socially since leaving my classroom. "He still asks about you," she said through tears. "He says you were the only teacher who really helped him understand math. I realize now that I may have misunderstood what was happening during those tutoring sessions. Rosa, I never did anything inappropriate with Tommy. I was just trying to help him learn. I know that now. I've been talking to other parents, and we realized that we may have overreacted. The district was asking us leading questions, making us think there was something wrong when there wasn't." She offered to write a letter retracting her complaints and supporting my attempt to return to teaching. It was a kind gesture, but too little, too late. My teaching certificate had been revoked, and no school district would hire someone with my history, regardless of subsequent exonerations. Several other parents eventually reached out with similar apologies and offers to support my appeal for reinstatement, but the damage was permanent. Once accused of inappropriate conduct with children, a teacher can never fully clear their name, no matter how baseless the allegations prove to be. I never did return to the classroom. Instead, I channeled my passion for education into writing curriculum materials and training teachers on appropriate boundaries and child safety protocols. It was meaningful work, but it felt like being allowed to watch a party through the window rather than being invited inside. The darkest thing my colleagues ever did behind closed doors wasn't what they did to students, it was what they did to me. A system designed to protect children became a weapon used to destroy an innocent teacher's life, all in the name name of being safe rather than sorry. The real victims, of course, were the students who lost a teacher who genuinely cared about their success and well-being. In trying to protect them from a threat that didn't exist, the system robbed them of the very thing that makes education meaningful: authentic human connection between teachers and students. 8 years later, I still wake up some mornings forgetting that I'm no longer a teacher, reaching for lesson plans that don't exist and thinking about students I'll never see again. The accusations were false, but their consequences were devastatingly real. A reminder that in our current climate of fear and suspicion, even innocence isn't enough to protect you from the mob.